أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، الشفيع المذنبين وخاتم النبيين، نبينا وشفينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله الآخر لحد مني لزيارتكم. Let's join together. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمسابنا بأبا عبد الله الحسين عليه الصلاة والسلام. The day of Arba'een is a day where in many ways it is no less a day than the day of Ashura. And usually on the day of Arba'een, when I'm asked to recite a lecture or a majlis on the actual day of Arba'een, I tend only to recite the Masayib. Today, however, I want to just make a couple of very, very brief points, and then I want to come to Masayib. It is not going to be a long majlis. I know that many of you want to probably go back to work, and they have taken some time off work, and they want to go back to their work. But I just wanted to conclude, and before I conclude, I was requested to ask you also first to recite Surah Fatiha for the Isale Sawab of one of the members who was brutally killed in Pakistan by the name of Javed Naqvi? Sorry? Ammar Naqvi. His nephew was the one who was killed in Pakistan. And for all those who have been targeted, just because they are the followers of Amirul Mu'mineen, they are the followers of the Ahlul Bayt and the pristine teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, we should recite one Surah Fatiha for their Isale Sawab, please. That as we sit here and inshallah we mourn and lament over the day of Arba'een and the trials and tribulations of the Ahlul Bayt, I do want to just make a couple of points before I go into the Masayib. And that is that I think it is really important now that as we've come to the end of the time where we do the Azaa of Imam Hussein, the season of the Azaa. Of course, the Azaa continues all year. But it is really important that this time is a precious time that we take in order to reflect on how do we continue to what we have been exposed to over the last few days in Muharram. And I think it is important that we, as we mentioned last night, that we take a pledge and we make a commitment to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And a pledge and a commitment is one that we fulfill on how we are going to transform ourselves to be able to follow the teachings of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. How we are going to be able to follow the teachings, especially his teachings around humanity and his teachings around being good to other people, regardless of their race, of their religion, of their color or whatever, but to understand that the basis of the religion of Islam is to be good to other people. In fact, when the Holy Prophet was asked, what is the purpose as to why you have come here? What is the purpose, the Holy Prophet was asked, as to why you have come in this world? The Holy Prophet replied, Inni bu'istu li'utammima makarimul akhlaq. He said, the only purpose as to why I have come here is to perfect your moral and ethical behavior. Not to establish your moral and ethical behavior, but to perfect your moral and ethical behavior. In so saying, the Holy Prophet is saying that all of us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has instilled in us a capacity to be able to be moral and ethical in our lives. And the Holy Prophet is saying that I have come here in order to perfect that for you. So let us reflect on how we're going to transform our lives and to really follow the teachings of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. One of the ways that I think we should also be very cognizant of in trying to continue this message of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and that is through the process of ziyarah, through the process of the visitation of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, through the process of ziyarah. You see, when we recite ziyarah, we have to understand that ziyarah has a very specific meaning. If you look at the word ziyarah, and if you look at it and try and go deep into what it means, ziyarah actually means to deflect away from something. Now you may say to yourself that, wait a minute, I thought ziyarah meant to go and visit somebody, to go and meet somebody, right? To do the ziyarah of somebody. Why are you saying that it means you are deflecting away from something? The word ziyarah comes from the fact that you have to deflect away from something. The philosophy behind it is that when you go and visit this personality, you are deflecting away from everything else, and your focus is just that personality that you're visiting. That is what ziyarah means. It means that you leave your worldly desires, you leave your ingrained culture of being attached to the materialistic realm and materialistic world aside, and you focus on just that personality that you're visiting, and you focus on that personality in such a way that you make a commitment that I'm going to follow that personality. I'm going to follow the teachings of that personality. And that is the meaning of ziyarah. Every time your hand comes down from the sky onto your chest as you are doing matam, at every beat of that matam, you are making a commitment to Imam Hussein that I'm going to follow your teachings. Every time you kiss that alam of Abul Fadl Abbas alayhi salam, the alam is not, it's when you kiss that alam, you have to understand it is min sha'air Allah. It is one of the signs of Allah. When you kiss that alam, the true meaning of reverence to the alam, the true meaning of respect to the alam is when you kiss it, the intention of your kissing it is such that I am kissing this alam because I am now making a commitment that I will follow the teachings of Abul Fadl Abbas. Then you have kissed the alam. We have to think about these things. It's very, very important that we understand that the purpose for us is to transform ourselves. And the azah is a means towards achieving that purpose. The azah is very important. It's very, very important. But it is a means towards achieving that transformation. And one of the ways we can transform ourselves is to do the ziyarah of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Now, there are 4 ziyarats that we know that are absolutely, that are mawthur, right? We know that they are absolutely from the lips of the Masoom. There is no doubt in it. 4 ziyarah. One is, of course, Ziyarat-e-Waritha, which we recite every Thursday night. The other is Ziyarat-e-Ashura. We know also that that is from the lips of a Masoom. The third is Ziyarat Aminullah. And the fourth is Ziyarat Jamia Kabir. These four ziyarats we know are absolutely from the lips of a Ma'asum, right? But as it comes to the ziyarat of Arba'een also happens to be one of those ziyarat that most likely is from the lips of a Ma'asum. Our 11th Imam, Imam Hassan al-Askari, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, he includes the performance of Ziyarat Arba'een as one of the 5 marks of a believer in his hadith. He says that the person who performs Ziyarat al-Arba'een, meaning what the Imam is saying, that the person who goes to Karbala for the visitation of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein on the day of Arba'een is the mark of a believer. He also says, of course, that in addition to that, the one who recites 51 rakat salat daily. So the 17 rakat, of course, we know, right, is wajib. But then there is the mustahab nafila of the wajib salat. That is a mark of a believer. Now, whenever I say this, there are some people who get really, kind of pumped up about it, and they say that, okay, from today I'm going to do nafila of every salat. And I think what you need to do is you need to step back a little bit. Because sometimes what happens, in Gujarati we call it, soda no josh. When you open that, in Africa we used to have the bottles of Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And when you opened it, initially it would fizz, right? And then it would just settle down, right? So what sometimes, if you want to start to recite the nafila, do it gradually. Don't just say to yourself that, okay, from today, 51 rakat, I'm going to recite nafila. And you've never done it in your life. Because it'll be hard for you to sustain it. And I'm just telling you, it'll be hard for you to sustain it. Start with something smaller and then gradually build yourself up. Best one to start with is the nafila of Isha. That's the easiest, because the nafila of Isha you recite sitting down, right? It's 2 rakat salat whilst you are sitting down, right? It's a very easy one to recite after Isha salat. So start with that and then build yourself up, because the 11th Imam is saying that this is one of the signs of a believer. Audible recitation of Bismillah in your salat when you recite the surah is one of the other signs of a believer, according to the 11th Imam. Wearing a ring on one's right hand, right? Wearing a ring on one's right hand, especially if it is aqiq or something like that, which is highly recommended, is again a sign of a believer. And of course, doing sajda on the dust, doing sajda on clay, and highly recommended for us to do sajda on the dust of Karbala as being one of the signs of a believer. It's interesting when you look at these signs, it is these signs, some of these signs at least, that the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt use in order to recognize us as the believers. And that's when they target us. And these are the signs from the 11th Imam. So it's important that, we understand. Now, of course, we will ask this question that, I don't have the ability to go and do the ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam on the day of Arba'een. We are all here, and Allah has not given us the opportunity today to go and do the visitation of Imam Hussein in Karbala. So does that mean that I'm going to be deprived of this particular great act that we perform? And of course, Allah is merciful. Allah is merciful, right? He does not say that if you are not able to go for whatever reason, that means that you are not going to be eligible or able to actually have the benefits of the great rewards of doing the ziyarah of Imam Hussein on the day of Arba'een. You can do, the hadith is clear about this. The hadith says that you can do the ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. You look at Kamil al-Ziyarat, it'll say you can do the ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, from afar. You don't have to necessarily be close. It is better, of course, if you are there. But if you're not there, you can do the ziyarat of Arba'een from afar. But there is a shart, there is a condition to it. And the condition is that when you are performing the ziyarah, that you do the ziyarah with ma'rifah. And that means that you do the ziyarah having the understanding of who Aba Abdullah al-Hussein is. What was his message? What are his teachings? And when you understand the personality of which you are doing the ziyarah of Arba'een, then trust me, I am telling you with confidence, you will get the rewards of the ziyarah of Arba'een. So when we do the ziyarah of Arba'een today, inshallah, after the program, think about this personality of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. Think about his teachings, and as the ziyarah is being recited, think about the commitments we're going to make in order to follow the teachings of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Then we will have done the ziyarah of Arba'een. It's very important to understand. Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, he states that the heavens wept over Imam Hussein for 40 mornings, rising red and setting red. And as we complete the 40 days of remembrance of our Imam, we have to reassert our pledge of obedience and our loyalty to him by saying, and we will say this in the ziyarah, that I bear witness that you are the Imam who is the most upright, the pious, the well-pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the most pure and the most guided and the most rightly guided. We are going to pledge this. And then you pledge that, I bear witness that you fulfilled the pledge of Allah and that you struggled in His way. But then you will say that I am that who will be a friend of whoever befriends Aba Abdullah. And I will be I'll dissociate myself with anyone who is the enemy of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. That is the pledge that we have to commit to. It's not an empty pledge. It's a very important pledge. We do it even every Thursday night sometimes, and we do it without thinking. We don't think about the fact that what an important pledge this is. But it is one of the most important pledges that you make to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And that is why you say to him, وَقَلْبِي لِقَلْبِكُمْ سِلْمٌ وَأَمْرِي لِأَمْرِكُمْ مُتَّبِعٌ. You said to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, my heart is resigned to your heart, and my conduct will follow the example of your conduct. So every time you carry out an act, you have to think to yourself, is this act that I'm carrying out, is this really aligned to the act that Imam Hussein would have carried out? Would he be happy with what I am doing, or would he not be happy with what I'm doing? وَقَلْبِي لِقَلْبِكُمْ سِلْمٌ وَأَمْرِي لِأَمْرِكُمْ مُتَّبِعٌ. You see, Karbala has taught us a variety of godly values. However, these godly values can be easily forgotten. We can easily forget these values. And one way to ensure that these godly values are gradually introduced into our lives is that after we have passed through this emotional state, where we have heard the horrendous tragedy and the massacre, and our feelings have been aroused, and we have been empathetic, and we have empathized and sympathized for the suffering, and now we have started to develop a liking for the and love for goodness, a liking and love for justice, a liking and love for beauty. When we have come through this state where we are now in love with perfection, we're in love with virtue, and we begin to feel this experience this rage and anger and hatred against evil, and whatever the forces of Yazid stood for, because they stood for evil. When we have done that, now these emotions that we have cannot be confined and boxed in to this place and time. Now we need to expose them, and we need to carry them out in such a way that we implement these emotions into our day-to-day life by following the example of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And that, my friends, is my message to you. It is important that we have this message and that we understand what we have done and we take this opportunity. What a great blessing of Allah. What a great blessing of Allah that year in, year out, He gives us this opportunity to mourn and lament over Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, and He gives us the opportunity to transform ourselves. What an opportunity. Let's not let this opportunity go by. Please recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. It is the day of Arba'een. And the day of Arba'een, as I mentioned, is no less than the day of Ashura. When Imam Sajjad alayhi salam and the Kafila, the caravan of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, had returned to Karbala, all the women were crying on the graves of their loved ones. And the Maqatil say that Janab Zainab alayhi salam, Janab Zainab sometimes would run to the grave of one shaheed, and then she would run to the grave of another shaheed. It is said that she would sometimes cry on the grave of Hazrat Qasim alayhi salam, and she would console Farwa. And sometimes she would sit with Kulsum and cry on the grave of Ali al-Akbar. She would console Kulsum. When she came to the grave of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, she hugs the grave of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And as she hugs the grave of Imam Hussein, she says to her brother, "Oh, my brother Abu Abdullah, Zainab is embarrassed for the responsibility that you had given to Zainab for the 4-year-old daughter that you had given her. Zainab has not been able to bring your daughter back to Karbala, for she has been buried in the Zindan and the jail of Shah." After 3 days, Imam Sajjad says, now it's time to go to Medina. He says to the Ahl Haram, it is time to go to the Medina. The women folk now get ready to go towards Medina. When Saniya Zahra, when Janab Zainab had ensured that all the ladies had mounted the camels, she saw that there was one camel that was empty. She goes back to Imam Sajjad and she says to Imam Sajjad, "Oh, my son Sajjad, we are missing one lady." Now Janab Zainab goes back towards the graves, and she saw that there is one grave, and she saw that there is one grave where Janab Rubab, who was still sitting on the grave of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein and Ali Asghar. Bibi Zainab comes to Rubab and says to Rubab, "Oh, Rubab, it is time for us to go to Medina." Rubab says to Janab Zainab, "Oh, Saniya Zahra, leave me here at the grave of my Abu Abdullah. Leave me here at the grave of my Ali Asghar, for I have nothing now left in Medina. All the relation that I had, I have lost. I have lost my Abu Abdullah here. I have lost my Ali Asghar here, and I have lost my 4-year-old daughter in the Zindan of Sham. Why should I now come to Medina?" Azadaran Hussein, this caravan now makes its way towards Medina. When the caravan comes outside of Medina, Imam Sajjad now asks that the tents be put up at the border of Medina. And then he says to Bashir, who was their guide, he says to Bashir, "Oh Bashir, now go to Medina and give the news to the people of Medina that the Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet has returned, and that Hussein and his family and his companions were brutally massacred and martyred in Karbala. and the women and children have returned. Bashir goes to Medina and he makes the announcement. He says, "Oh people of Medina, Medina is now not worth living anymore. Hussein and his family and his companions have been murdered. The women folk have returned and they are awaiting you at the border of Medina." When Bashir says this, people start to leave their houses and they close their businesses and they gather outside the mosque of the Prophet. They gather outside Masjid al-Nabawi. Now Bashir goes to the locality of Banu Hashim. There was a locality, an area where all the Banu Hashim used to live, and he makes the same announcement in the locality of Banu Hashim that Hussein has been martyred. An 8-year-old boy with his frail old grandmother comes out of the house holding the hand of the old lady, and he embraces the horse of Bashir and he says to Bashir, "Oh Bashir, my grandmother is asking what happened to Abbas." "Oh Bashir, my grandmother is asking what happened to Abbas." And Bashir says, "Tell your grandmother that Abul Fazl Abbas has also been murdered and massacred in Karbala." When Ummul Baneen heard this, she said to Bashir, "Oh Bashir, this is what I wanted to hear, for I would not have been able to bear that my Abba Abdullah was killed and my Abbas had returned alive." Azadarane Hussein, جب یہ لوٹا ہوا قافلہ مدینہ واپس آیا ہے، زینب اب پیغمبر کی قبر پہ آتی ہے، زینب رسول اللہ کی قبر پہ آتی ہے۔ ایک مرتبہ زینب نے کہا، "السلام علیک یا جدہ، السلام علیک یا رسول اللہ." جناب زینب نے رسول اللہ کی قبر پہ گریہ کی، "یا رسول اللہ." زینب لٹ گئی، زینب لٹ گئی۔ چادر اور عبا کے اندر سے ایک خون بھرا ہوا کرتا نکالا اور جناب زینب نے کرتے کو قبر کے پاس رکھا اور کہا، "نانا جان، یہ حسین کی امانت ہے، نانا پھر اکیلی آؤں گی لیکن زینب کی طرف سے پرسہ قبول کیجئے." عزادارو، مورخ لکھتے ہیں کہ اب زینب اپنی ماں کی قبر پہ آتی ہے۔ عزاداران حسین، جب بیٹی سب لٹ کے ماں کے پاس آتی ہے تو وہ منظر کیسا ہوگا؟ بیٹی ماں کی قبر پہ آئی، زینب نے کہا، اماں زینب لٹ گئی، حسین شہید ہو گئے۔ میں نہیں جانتا کہ زینب نے ماں کے ساتھ کیا گفتگو کی ہوگی، مجھے مقتل میں نہیں ملتا ہے کہ زینب نے ماں کے ساتھ کیا گفتگو کی ہوگی۔ آپ سوچتے ہوں گے کہ شاید زینب نے قاسم کے زخمی لاش کے بارے میں بتایا ہوگا، یا پھر زینب نے ماں سے کہا ہوگا کہ ماں جائے حسین نے علی اکبر کے کلیجے سے برچی کو کیسے نکالا ہے، یا پھر آپ یہ سوچتے ہوں گے کہ زینب نے شاید ماں سے یہ کہا ہوگا کہ اماں آپ کا حسین کیسے علی اصغر کے لیے پانی مانگنے کے لیے گیا تھا اور کیسے حرملہ نے علی اصغر کی گردن کو ذبح کر دیا ہوگا۔ زینب نے شاید یہ سب کہا ہوگا، لیکن میرا دل کہتا ہے کہ زینب نے شاید یہ نہیں کہا، یا شاید زینب نے یہ کہا کہ اماں یہ لعین ہمارے خیمے میں گھس آئے اور شمر نے آپ کی بیٹی کی چادر نوک کے نیزے سے اتار دی۔ اماں یہ زینب جس کی آواز نامحرموں نے نہیں سنی تھی، وہ زینب کوفہ اور شام کے دربار میں بے چادر پھرائی گئی۔ زینب نے اماں سے کہا کہ جب اکیلی آؤں گی تو رسیوں کے وہ نشان دکھاؤں گی اور تازیانوں کے وہ نشان دکھاؤں گی۔ عزاداران حسین، عورتیں سب بیٹھ گئی، جناب زینب بیٹھی ہے، اب سب عورتیں بیٹھ گئی۔ آخری مصائب پر رہو عزاداروں، دلوں پہ ہاتھ رکھ کے سننا۔ ایک مرتبہ جب زینب بیٹھی ہوئی ہے، ام البنین آتی ہے، ام البنین زینب کے پاس بیٹھ گئی۔ ام البنین جب زینب کے پاس بیٹھ گئی تو ام البنین نے زینب سے کہا، ثانیہ زہرا میں سوال کرنا چاہتی ہوں۔ جناب زینب نے کہا، اماں کیجئے، کیا سوال ہے آپ کا؟ ام البنین کہتی ہے، ثانیہ زہرا میں سننا چاہتی ہوں کہ میرا عباس کیسے شہید ہوا۔ میں سننا چاہتی ہوں کہ میرا عباس کیسے شہید ہوا۔ بس عزاداران حسین، اب زینب ذاکری کر رہی ہے اور ام البنین عزادار ہے۔ زینب ذاکری کر رہی ہے، ام البنین عزادار ہے۔ ایک مرتبہ زینب نے کہا، اماں عباس فرات کے کنارے نہر فرات پانی لینے کے لیے گئے تھے، مشکیزہ سکینہ سے کو لے کر پانی لینے کے لیے گئے تھے۔ اب ام البنین رو رہی ہے۔ پھر زینب نے کہا، عباس نے مشکیزہ سکینہ میں پانی کو بھرا۔ ام البنین رو رہی ہے۔ اب زینب نے کہا، جب عباس واپس آ رہے تھے تو کسی لعین نے عباس کے دائیں ہاتھ کو شہید کیا۔ جب ام البنین نے یہ سنا، ام البنین رو رہی ہے۔ اب زینب نے کہا، عباس نے مشکیزے کو سنبھالا، آگے بڑھے، کسی نے آ کے عباس کے بائیں ہاتھ کو شہید کیا۔ ام البنین رو رہی ہے۔ زینب نے کہا، اماں عباس بہت کوشش کر رہے تھے کہ مشکیزہ سکینہ کو خیمے گاہ تک پہنچا دے۔ پھر زینب نے کہا، اماں پھر ایک وقت آتا ہے کہ حرملا نے 2 تیر کا وار کیا۔ ایک تیر عباس کے آنکھ میں پیوست ہوا، دوسرا تیر مشک سکینہ میں پیوست ہوا۔ اماں آنکھ سے خون بہنے لگا، مشک سے پانی بہنے لگا۔ اب ام البنین رو رہی ہے، زینب ذاکری کر رہی ہے۔ پھر ایک مرتبہ زینب نے کہا، اماں کسی نے عباس کے سر پہ وار کیا، میرا عباس گھوڑے سے زمین پہ آیا۔ بس یہ سننا تھا۔ ام البنین تڑپ گئی، کہتی ہے، ثانیہ زہرا آگے اب کچھ مت کہنا۔ ثانیہ زہرا میرا آخری سوال ہے۔ جناب زینب نے کہا، اماں کیا سوال ہے؟ ام البنین نے کہا، ثانیہ زہرا جب کوئی گھوڑے سے زمین پہ گرتا ہے تو اپنے ہاتھوں کا سہارا لیتا ہے۔ ہائے میرا عباس گھوڑے سے زمین پہ کس طرح گرا ہوگا، یہ سننا تھا۔ زینب نے کہا، اماں عباس گھوڑے سے زمین پہ اسی طرح گرے ہیں جیسے زینب اونٹ سے گری ہے۔ عباس کے دونوں ہاتھ شہید تھے۔ عباس جب گرا ہے تو منہ کے بل گرا ہے۔ زینب کے دونوں ہاتھ پسے گردن بندھے ہوئے تھے۔ جب زینب بھی گری ہے تو منہ کے بل گری۔ ماتم حسین۔